Okay, hello folks and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the shadow from the pulps. I've already shown you a video of the pulp facsimile editions that I've got. And if you remember, a little while ago I did a series on Doc Savage as he appeared in paperbacks. So today we're going to have a look at the shadow's return from obscurity in paperbacks. Just give you a quick bit of background. I know I've mentioned this before, but for those of you who haven't seen the other videos, the shadow was a character that came about from a radio competition. And eventually it became a pulp magazine in 1931. Now this was during the height of the Depression in the United States, and people just didn't have any money. All they had was radio. Television hadn't been invented yet, but I mean, nobody could afford a television, unless you were very lucky. And so they decided to print these heroes in magazines that were made of pulp to keep the cost down, and they came out at 10 cents. And even that would have been, quite a lot for people at that time. And so it was that characters like the Shadow, the Spider, Doc Savage, G8 and his Battle Aces and others emerged. Now, I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that the Shadow was the most popular of these characters, and remained so from 1931 right through the 30s and the early 40s, and then I forget which actual year it was, but sometime in the middle of the 40s, maybe 44, the Pulp magazine, which had very lovely lurid covers, smashing covers, most of them, it went to a digest size magazine, and the covers got progressively more awful, and the stories weren't quite up to scratch because they were, whereas most of the pulps were written by Walter Gibson as Maxwell Grant. Maxwell Grant still kept the name on the books, but they were written by other authors. And eventually in 1949 the pulp ceased. Now the Shadow went on hiatus until 1963. And in 1963 Belmont Books decided to resurrect them in some original stories. Now, these stories weren't, they weren't the greatest I've seen, but they weren't quite up to the pulp magazine standards, let's put it that way. But they still retained the that was the first issue. They still retained the spirit of the character, at least. To say this was the first issue that came out, Return of the Shadow, in 1963. And you notice that they were written by Walter Gibson. They dropped the Maxwell Grant pseudonym, if you like. And obviously, the first issue the first paper must have sold all right, because they did a few more. So we had the Shadow Strikes, and Shadow Beware. As I say, these covers weren't up to the standard of the pulps, but at least they had something to do with the character, unlike some other paperbacks that came out more recently. Yeah, unfortunately someone's decided to write on that one, but it's the only copy I could find at a decent price. Although, having said that, I think most of these I've had way back since the 60s probably. And this particular cover was pinched off one of the Pulp magazines. It was one of the better covers. You'll notice we've gone back to Maxwell Grant now. Which, as I say, was the pseudonym of Walter Gibson, and later on many other writers. Then we had the Mark of the Shadow. You'll notice these were distributed over here, which made them a bit easier to come by. That also was reprinted from a Pulp magazine. And we had this strange title of Shadow Go Mad. That's an original cover, I believe. And Night of the Shadow. I think that's another original. And finally, a very strange one, Shadow Destination Moon. Don't ask. And that was it for Belmont. They decided to pack it in. I don't know whether it was view poor sales or whatever. Then there was a one-shot by, who was it again? Tempo Books, Grove of Doom. That was actually a reprint from one of the Pulp magazines. But they only did one issue, so there again, I guess it didn't sell so well. Then Bantam Books decided they would get in on the Shadow. And this would be 1969. So another few years have gone by. They decided to resurrect him again, but this time they decided to reprint the Pulp stories. So you had The Living Shadow, which I believe was the first story. Shadows are a bit odd because they had the Shadow unmasked, which you never saw in the Pulp magazines. He always had his scarf wrapped around his face. And then Ghost Makers. I mean, they weren't bad covers. I just didn't like the way they depicted the Shadow. Then we had Eyes of the Shadow. These are all early Shadow stories from the very early 30s. I say not bad covers in themselves, but unfortunately they were covered with a very large logo. Shadow Laughs. Then we had Death Tower. I mean, that's quite a nice cover. Followed by Hidden Death. I mean, I think that was probably intended as a spider cover, because that looks very much like the spider character with a hat and the web and everything. So I think they pinched that one. And then we went back to the normal style of cover. Kingdom's Doom. And that was the last of the Bantam run. I think they did. And did they do 7? So there again. I don't know whether it was sales or some other reason. But poor old Shadow went into hiding again under wraps until Pyramid decided to reprint the Pulp stories. Now, can't remember what date This came out 74, so it wasn't too long a hiatus. I think the last Bantam was around 1970. So he went into under wraps for another 4 years. Now, that's another reprinting of the first Shadow Pulp, and then Jim Steranko got involved by doing the covers, and that made them a much better bet. So from here on in, I think a majority of the covers were by him. Excuse me. Luckily I have a complete set of these, so they're all in nice shape. Lovely covers. I mean, when you compare these to what went before, it's a complete transformation, shall we say. This is the proper Shadow from the Pulps, but of course Jim Steranko is a big fan, and he knows a lot about that particular genre. We had double Z, another nice colour. I mean, you could almost compare these to the Doc Savage paperbacks that James Barmer did that I showed you a while back. Now we have the Crime Cult, number 6, and moving on to 7. Here's my favourite cover. That's more or less a direct take on one of the Pulp covers, but lovely nevertheless. The red there. Right, we'll just pull these forward so I can get to them easier. And we have number 8, Mox. Some strange titles, these Pulp magazines. Romanoff Jewels is the next one. And number 10, Silent 7. To say, these are all very, very similar to the Pulp magazines, but just in the Steranko fashion. He's an artist that I particularly like. There we go. I think I've had an accident with this at some time because these were all mint when I bought them, but that's developed a slight crease, which is annoying to me personally. Anyway, Kings of Crime, Shadow Millions. That is very, very typical of the Pulp cover illustrations. I mean, it's a pleasure to show these actually because they're absolutely great. It gives me great nostalgia because I used to have a collection of Shadow Pulps, and it's one of the regrets in my life that I sold them. But I was skint. I had to go. Right, many years ago. Right to Have Green Eyes. That's a lovely cover. Just as an aside, a local artist actually did a take on that, and he actually gave me the original sketch, which I have somewhere. Yeah, lovely one. And Creeping Death. Oh, so reminiscent of the covers, the original covers. It's a shame actually when we went to number 14 that they decided to have this banner at the top. I think these ones look better. Even though actually the banner is smaller, I still think they look better because you have some artwork, at least up here. whereas the artwork gets cut straight off. Anyway, that was number 14, The Creeping Death. And Grey Fist. Shadow, Shadow. I mean, I haven't read as many of these as I would like. I mean, I've read quite a few of these paperbacks, but I haven't read as many of the full stories as I would have liked. Even when I had the the pulps, I was too afraid to read them because pulps are generally quite, shall we say, they're not conducive to handling, although they were in nice condition. Shadow, Shadow, and then move up to number 17 here. Fingers of Death. And Murder Trail. Love the Zeppelin. And Zemba. Nice cover. I mean, a lot of people sort of denigrate these pulp stories, but I mean, they're an important part of social history. I mean, you know, people like Walter Gibson who wrote these, I mean, they would knock out, they would knock out thousands of words per day, just to live really, because the pay was pretty poor, and they would just knock the stuff out. But you know, considering that, it was quite good quality and readable. And you know, as I say, it's very much a part of American social history. And to be quite honest, you know, if you really like a character, they're perfectly readable. We have here Shark Monster. Weird titles I used to give them. But of course, there was a whole pulp genre that was given over to women in distress and in sort of like scanty dresses. Not too much of it in The Shadow, I've got to say, but Jim Steranko, being Jim Steranko, he decided he would shove a couple in. Well, as you can see, he thought he would do a couple, The Wealth Seekers. Oh, in fact, we have a third. He must have, and a fourth coming up. He must have had this little period when he decided to put scantily clad women in, which I've got no objection to personally. It's that one, The Silent Death 22. And finally, we have The Death Giver. That was unfortunately, last issue. They did reprint a few titles. Now, as far as I know, I have all the reprints, and they reprinted them with new covers, so I had to have them, even though I've got them already. That was number 1, Living Shadow. Lovely cover, that one. Really evocative of the era. And we jump to number 9. I don't know why these 4 in particular got reprinted, but there was no rhyme or reason. You know, you could understand if it was 1 to 4, but it was number 9. I love this one. Number 11, Kings of Crime. That's a great cover, that is superb. I'm going to leave it up a minute, alright, so you can a good look at it. That is something else, that one. And then the last reprint was Shadowed Millions, which I think is another very nice cover. Love the car. Yeah, so that was the Shadow in paperback. I think I have a full set of the ones that matter. They did do another very horrible series of called The Shadow. I mean, it had nothing to do whatsoever with this character. There's a bloke in a sort of like a polo neck sweater, as I remember. Didn't last very long, but I can assure you that it was pretty foul, and I refused to buy them. I think there might have been another couple as well along the line somewhere, but as I say, they had nothing to do with the Pulp character whatsoever. I do have, I've just covered the paperbacks today. I do have a collection of Shadow ephemera, like a Shadow scrapbook, and all of those Steranko covers in black and white, and a few more bits and pieces, but that was it for the paperbacks. I thought I would stick to that today because otherwise the video would have gone on for another hour. I'm quite excited about something I've actually got coming in the post concerning the Shadow, so at some stage I will show you that. But anyway, for today, that's it, folks. I will be back as usual with something or other in the near future. Thank you for watching, subscribing. Please share, because I'm sure there are lots of people who might be interested in this particular subject. I know the one I did about the facsimile editions was quite well viewed and popular. So yeah, please share it if you can, and I will see you very soon. Bye bye now.